which DigiByte can participate in if need be. And we're going to go into some highlights. Our learning objectives are we're gonna talk about the history of the Lightning Network. You know, what prompted it, who started it, um, what's the use case, why was it started, what's it looking to solve. Understanding the requirements to participate in the Lightning Network. So with all this technology, all of it requires a certain baseline of technological requirements. What does it mean for the Lightning Network? And then last, and probably spend most time on what's the pros and cons of using and accessing the Lightning Network. So this is meant to be a high level overview of what the Lightning Network is. And Bitcoin, when it was designed to be a peer-to-peer electronic cash, the problem with that is it can't scale, which means, like, when you think scale, think speed. So right now, the Bitcoin network is 7 transactions per second, and that's if everybody wanted to use the Bitcoin network to buy a cup of coffee or do daily transactions, um, combine that with your 10-second or your 10-minute block time, everything, and it's very expensive. So there's a scaling issue as a peer-to-peer currency. And there's been a lot of discussion about how to deal with that. And there's been forks. DigiByte is a fork of Bitcoin in that way, that, or derivative of it, that was trying to solve that scaling issue. Bitcoin Cash is probably like the most famous one. And there was, a very public dissension of how that should happen. So when that first came up with Bitcoin, you got the Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, where Bitcoin Cash increased the block size to try and increase the speed and scalability of Bitcoin. But in 2016 or 2015, 2015 was actually when the white paper was written on a scalable solution for Bitcoin. And we had, oops, sorry, go back. There were two Bitcoin developers that decided to tackle this problem, and that was Thaddeus. I can't pronounce his last name well. Draja and Joseph Poon, which were, again, both Bitcoin developers, and they envisioned a second layer network. It's not a blockchain, but it's like a mesh network that accesses Bitcoin. It can go back and forth between the Bitcoin network and basically delay transactions, so they're not on chain, which changes fundamentally the speed and cost of being able to interact with the Bitcoin network. We'll go into a little bit more detail on that in further slides, but in the resources section, there's the white paper for the Lightning Network is linked there, so you can do some more like deep dive reading on that. And it was just meant to be a second layer to enable off-chain transactions. And again, that we'll go into some deeper discussion on what that means to have off-chain transactions. But here's a visual of what it looks like. Shortly after they wrote the white paper, they started Lightning Labs, and was funded by people like Jack Dorsey and Blockstream to support a scaling solution to Bitcoin. But you can see from the visual here, you've got this like a network above the Bitcoin network that can plug back into it. So when you open and close channels, that's when, or when you close the channels, that's when you commit it to the blockchain. But until you do that, this is all just a network that's your payments are working within this network that's basically a layer above. And we're using Bitcoin here, but DigiByte, of course, can be used in this as well, because any blockchain that participates with the Lightning Network has to have SegWit, segregated witness protocol implemented into it in order to participate. So this is not something that can be used by every blockchain. Just check my notes. So the use cases of it really, when it comes to the Lightning Network, it's really about speed and cost of transactions. So it's not trying to do anything other than be a payments level solution of accessing the Bitcoin network. And I've seen a couple of different analogies for this. I like this analogy of it being like an HOV lane on a highway. So you're kind of just you're using a different lane, and then you get back in, to the main lane when that lane closes, right? So it's you can think of it like that. I've also uh, heard it described as kind of like a tab. Like if you're at your favorite restaurant or your favorite bar, and you just, instead of closing out every night, you have a tab open, and when, at the end of the month, say, that's when you close your tab. So you're not paying for every little transaction fee on the network. You're kind of lumping that into, like a one transaction type of thing. It's getting really widely adopted, and Strike, Shivo, Paxful, and real El Salvador is a huge, through Strike, is a huge proponent of the Lightning Network. So even like full nation states are starting to look at this as, a possible payment layer, and still accessing the Bitcoin network or UTXO networks that have SegWit implemented. Let's see, I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Yeah, so really, the use case is it's just a really one simple use case, and that is strictly payment driven. So we talked about SegWit a little bit, and that what that does is it's considered a soft fork of the Bitcoin protocol. Litecoin's implemented it. Several other chains have implemented it. DigiByte was the first to implement that, and what it allows you to do is it's a mailability solution where you can fundamentally make it easier to kind of change how you're interacting with other networks. It's You don't have to use it, but you can use it. So it's an ability to kind of self decide if that's something that you want to participate in. It's not a blockchain. So the Lightning Network isn't a blockchain, but it is a mesh network. So it does require Lightning nodes. And at the end, in the resources, I've linked a couple of different statistic sites about how many Lightning nodes there are. And we can take a look at that. But the more Lightning nodes that you have that you can access, the faster the network. Just like in the DigiByte network, the more nodes we have, the healthier the network is. Same thing here with the Lightning node. So while it's not a blockchain, you do need to have these nodes running, and you need to be connected to a Lightning node in order to participate. And ideally connected to more than one Lightning node to participate. And then you're going to have a wallet, and not all wallets are Lightning Network compatible. So you want to really make sure that if you're looking to access the system, that you're finding a Lightning Network compatible wallet. I believe Coinbase, Kraken, and even we just found out last week that Komodo did a atomic swap with DigiByte using the Lightning Network. So there's a lot of Lightning Network compatible wallets out there, but these are the things that you're going to need if you want to participate with that network. Any questions so far? I don't want to go too fast for this, but
I think we're
doing
good.
okay. Okay, so this is really the section for me. I think this is kind of the more interesting part of this. Is the pros and the cons when we're looking at any of this technology. So the pros, as we were talking about before, like why was the Lightning Network created? Was because Bitcoin just didn't scale. It was, it's too expensive. You don't want to pay, $10 for a transaction fee to buy a cup of coffee, and you don't want to have to wait a half an hour in order for that to clear. So it increases the speed. It also reduces the cost of the transactions themselves. Um, the payment channels offer private transactions in the way that when it's all lumped together in these payment channels as they're opened, to participate with the Lightning Network, it's not just a single payment, right? So if you're connected to a couple of different payment rails or payment channels and a couple of different nodes, it's all kind of lumped in together. So it's not it actually offers a layer of privacy, and this was something that kind of surprised me, that it was even like compared to Monero in terms of privacy, uh, in transactions if you're kind of lumped in with a bunch of other transactions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's
So
pretty
it's
interesting,
it's
actually.
not just it's not yeah, I was really kind of surprised about that too in my reading. So it's not quite so like wallet to wallet where you can kind of see, you're getting lumped in with a bunch of others if you do it with more than one, and so that they recommend like connecting to more than one node. So it is a layer of privacy in that way. Um, and as I was saying before with Komodo is, it 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 offers an atomic swap between coins, so there's an interoperability there. And next month we're going to be having our discussion on decentralized exchanges, and I'm hoping to have a Komodo, their chief technical officer, on for next month's discussion. And I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into this because that was something that they just completed just this month, so we can get a little bit more detail from them on that.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
So for the cons, there's just like the usability of it. So you've got to have a special wallet, and being able to participate at that level. Um, Now, here's the thing that I think is really interesting because I've always been kind of maximalist about being on chain, not necessarily maximalist about a specific chain, but that it is on chain. And so when you're participating with the Lightning Network, you're not participating with the blockchain directly in real time. It's kind of like an IOU in these payment channels. And then when the payment channel closes, that's when it gets put onto the blockchain. So it gets put on in like a tranche, right? And so when you're off the blockchain, then you're entering you're entering in another vector of vulnerability. So you could have a vulnerability for fraud here because you're not participating directly with the blockchain, if that makes sense. So until that payment channel is closed, there is the potential there where you can get hacked, or you can get money stolen. Um, One thing I want to add in here too, and I should add this in here when I update this slide, is that you have to, in order to participate with these payment channels, it's really like a multi-sig where you and somebody else are participating in a common transaction. And so you have to pre-fund that stuff. So you have to, instead of doing just like, okay, this is 5 DigiByte for here, I've got to pre-fund a certain amount in order to even participate, in order to even open up that channel. So that also could be seen as a con, if you will. But for me, one of the things that I find really fascinating about all of this, is how are we going to interact with, the regulatory systems as they sit now, and how are they going to treat this technology? And as a if you're somebody, let's say you're a merchant, let's say you're Coinbase, or even a regular person that has a payment channel open, um, and you're running a Lightning node. Uh, I will be really curious to see how the regulatory bodies look at this, because really what you are doing is you're an intermediary. You know, it's not peer to peer anymore. There's an intermediary layer. So right now it's all pretty new and it's not super heavily used, but I could see in the future them looking at this and saying, well, you know, you're a money transmitter, at least in the US. So the regulation around who runs a Lightning node and who can open up these channels, um, I think that's an ongoing conversation that we really need to watch closely, because this if it does turn out that they say, well, this if you're opening up these channels and you're running a Lightning node, then you're a money transmitter. That comes in the US comes with a certain amount of licensing, and not everybody will be able to do that, right? So what that would do is centralize this network to only those who could qualify for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And could you kind of go into maybe why it's important to be like have money transfer licenses, or does that tag into the potential for fraud? Like, where
Yeah,
do you see that coming?
it's a good question. So, just like with these BTMs, anytime that you have goods and services going through a network, it could be construed as okay, well, you're participating, if you want to think about it on a layman's level, like as a bank, as an intermediary. So how do we know that you're not going to be fraudulent to somebody else? So I could see them trying to put this through the regulatory cycle. um like I said, Lightning Labs has a lot of funding behind it, a lot of big names behind it. So I think it's going to be an interesting discussion going forward. But yeah, I could see that being something that we should think about before we become very dependent on a system like this. Um, and this is all moving under our feet, really. But another, as far as a discussion question on this, pros and cons. Uh, I was listening to a video that Andres Antonopoulos did on the Lightning Network, and someone had asked, if you were using a second layer network, could it make a hard fork of that original chain that you're using more difficult? So let's say you've got a lot of transactions on the Lightning Network, and we're going to hard fork DigiByte. Does that make the fork more difficult to implement? And I think that's a really fair thing to think about too, because again, this isn't being super widely used yet, and we're not completely dependent on it, especially not in DigiByte. But that could be an issue going down the line as these networks hard fork, because you're taking a certain amount of that off chain. Like, what does that do to like the airdrop? You know what I mean? Because that's not that you're not participating on chain. So it's again like one of those things that we really have to think about. I mean, it's kind of like if you give a mouse a cookie, all of these things are kind of interconnected. And as these networks get upgraded and forked, how does this second layer affect or participate with that fork? And there's not a way to airdrop. Let's say you fork it and you've got money on the Lightning, not you've got Bitcoin on the Lightning network. There's not a way to do that airdrop of the mirrored Bitcoin on that fork. Does that make sense?
What do you mean by the mirrored or the airdrop? You're
So
talking
let's
about.
say so let's say like this isn't gonna I mean don't say like this is gonna happen, but let's use Digibyte as an example. Okay, let's say people in Digibyte are accessing the Lightning network. And they're doing all their transactions through the secondary payment layer, right? Through these payment channels.
Mhm.
And so your Digibytes in these payment channels on this mesh network that's kind of lying above Digibyte.
Yeah.
Well, let's say DigiByte forks. We do a hard fork in DigiByte. Well, when you do a hard fork, you get that same, just like with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash. When you do that hard fork, you get the original coin you had, and then you get the forked coin, right?
Yeah.
If you do a hard fork like that. Well, if your coins are on the Lightning Network, and that could be a problem.
Would it be up to
Getting,
the operator of whatever pool or lightning node that you're running with?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you have to take it off the Lightning Network. I don't know how
Mhm.
you would, you know what I mean? So it's because it's not on chain,
Yeah.
right? It's in a different kind of ecosystem. So it's just one of those things to think about with, when we talk about the cons of this. It's like, okay, so you just added a different layer to this complexity. What does that mean? What is that it affects? Like, this might not be something that affects people tomorrow, but I think it's something to think about if we're saying, okay, let's scale this out to everybody. And like I said, Venezuela's using, not Venezuela, El Salvador's using it. When you get full nation states using it and it gets widely accepted and widely used, what does that mean for forks in the future if something has to be forked? Just something, again, I think is an interesting issue to think about. Um, and when we talked about, like, oh, it can actually increase your, like, anonymity. Um, if you're working within the Lightning Network and you're in the payment network channels with a bunch of other people, then you're not identified.
Mhm.
But if you're only connecting to a single node, you've got a lot of Bitcoin in your wallet, it actually makes it a little bit more dangerous from
Yeah.
what I can understand. So you want to, if you're going to participate with it, you don't want to participate with just like a single node. You want to participate with several nodes so that it's kind of like moved around, almost like, not exactly like Dandelion, but kind of that same kind of shuffling of, it's not easy to pinpoint you exactly.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Um, and then the other thing when we talk about the cons is we're talking about payments, and we have these payment networks, right, that are open. Well, what if the price fluctuates a lot, and payment channels close because the price fluctuation is so much? So there's also that kind of other other thing to think about in the prospect of all of this is, how do those fluctuations in price affect the viability of people keeping their channels open on the Lightning Network? So these are all just kind of things to think about when you're kind of reading about it and talking about it. It's not quite so like, oh, this is just a scalable, perfect solution that's cheap and easy and nothing's wrong. Like, there's definitely layers of things to think about in its interaction with the ecosystem, with the price, with the safety, the regulations. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I have like faint recollection of something about, yeah, you mentioned the loan nodes. Isn't there a little bit of like a vulnerability with the Lightning Network? It makes you a little bit of a target, especially if you have like a large balance on it. Is that something you
Exactly.
remember?
Exactly. And so again, it's just one of those things where, I mean, if you want to participate with it, I mean, I understand why people are excited for it, but I also think, I think there's enough things in this mesh network as a layer two. I also should give you pause and really think about, what does that mean? And like, for me, really more than anything is, if they get to a point where they say, okay, only licensed money transmitters can run a node, then it doesn't become just like a regular peer-to-peer transaction anymore. You've got this intermediary in there, and they might have to be sanctioned intermediaries. So how is that different than using a bank?
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, then they become beholden to that as well. So, I mean, it's never simple answers, but I think it's definitely something worth thinking about. Sure. And I want to go back here for just a minute because there was another discussion question I wanted to bring up, and I think I missed it. Um, oh no, we did cover all that. Okay, I just want to make sure. I thought I had missed something. Um, Now that I mean, as far as participating with the network, there's, opening up the channels and, how do you participate with the channels? That's like a deeper dive technological discussion. But this was just meant to be kind of a high level discussion of how do these things, how does this layer interact, and how does DigiByte play into this? And again, because DigiByte was the first UTXO, it was April 2017, I believe, to integrate SegWit. It was one of the first that actually could participate in the Lightning Network, but because it's got 560 transactions per second versus Bitcoin's 7 transactions per second, and we don't have it's not like a high use network yet. It's not something that people are like, oh, I got to use it. But with Bitcoin, people have, in order to use Bitcoin as a payment solution, they have to use Lightning Network. And so it's different. Like, we don't have a ton of exposure in the DigiByte community because we haven't really needed it. Not to say that more of us won't access it in the future, but I think as we do, there's just some things that we need to think about, and really keep our eye on how it gets developed and how the regulation participates with it. Um, so that's pretty much, the presentation for today. Again, just a high level uh, view of what the Lightning Network is, how to participate in it, and you can look at the resources here. There's some resources that were referenced into those slides, but I want to pull up that network. Give me one second. I want to pull up this stats. It's not letting me. Let me copy this. I'm gonna go and check out the stats on the actual Lightning Network itself, and let's take a look at that.
Okay.
So I put in 2 different sites. Are you seeing my stat site?
I'm still seeing
You still seeing the
the
PowerPoint?
slide. Yeah, the
Okay,
PowerPoint.
let me stop sharing, and I'm gonna start sharing again. Hold on one second. Let's see if there we go. Oh, why is it not letting me? Okay, there we go.
Thank you.
Okay, can you see it now?
Okay, got it.
So, I mean, they've got 16,000 nodes running right now and 75,000 channels.
That's quite large, actually.
Yeah, yeah. But and 33 new nodes just in the last 24 hours. But you got to remember, like, who are running nodes. Like, you've got big Coinbase, Kraken, Komodo. Like, exchanges are running these nodes and running these channels as well. So it would make sense that they're huge.
Mm-hmm.
And so the average node age, I find that interesting. And the average channel age, I find interesting. So, the node age is almost 2 or over 2 years. Channel age almost like over a year. That's interesting to me that these channels are staying open for so long.
And the Lightning Network fees are less than the on-chain, right? That's another.
Oh yeah, and that was really like a big driver of it. Because you're not having to pay miners, right? Because it's not being those payments aren't being processed. Like, if you were going to buy a cup of coffee and you weren't using the Lightning Network, but let's say you wanted to use Bitcoin to that transaction has to be validated on the blockchain, right? So those blockchain that's a heavy fee in the Bitcoin blockchain, and that fee can change as we've seen. So doing it off chain reduces the fees by a lot and also increases the speed.
But of course, there are some drawbacks or concerns there.
Exactly, and that's why I don't like to be a Debbie Downer, but I do think it's important to think about the cons,
Mhm.
um, because this is, this while it was started by, hardcore Bitcoin developers, it's also backed by, some pretty big corporate entity names, and I think this it's always good to take a good hard look at, details of that when you get those bigger players in there. Like it's not so much a grassroots thing as why would what are the motivations and what would be the drawbacks of participating, so like I said, for me, I'm always kind of like I'm looking at the regulation side of things, and I think that's something that we really need to be aware of because if we become dependent on something like the Lightning Network, and then later on they say, well, you Joe Schmo can't run a node. Right now, anybody could run a Lightning node. It might not always be the case. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So, especially if those node runners were seen as money transmitter license or money transmitters, then they have to be properly licensed. So it's just again, with all of this new technology, we really have to kind of keep in mind how is this interacting with the existing system? How much do we want to interact with the existing system as it sits? Um, and to me, I if we're able to use direct blockchain peer to peer without an intermediary, that for me personally is is what I would rather do,
Mhm.
than kind of going back into these centralized systems. And I could see this, and other people see it. Some people love it, but other people could see it too as like kind of a going back to where we were,
Yeah.
in order to meet the lacking of Bitcoin as a peer to peer transaction. So, but I think I always like looking at these kind of sites that just kind of give you just a broad level overview of what's happening with the networks themselves. So, like they've got what 47, uh, 40, almost 4,800 nodes just updated in the last 24 hours, and we're struggling to get 200 nodes on the DigiByte network. So it's definitely got a lot of support behind it. Um, but uh, just yeah, just interesting information for us all to keep in mind as we move forward. But yeah, look at that median fee rate. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, so it's 7%. I'm not sure how they're. So it's just 0.002
Satoshis.
cents. Okay, like it's a fraction of a cent. Is that what it's saying?
Yeah, that's a fraction of a Satoshi. So it's
Gotcha.
really it's it's cheap like Digibyte cheap.
Gotcha.
Um I um I can see why people are excited for it. Um I have, I have some healthy reservations about it.
Yeah, that's fair.
I do find it fascinating, and I think it sounds like a pretty smart solution in a lot of ways, but I think it's
It
everything is
does.
still
It does seem kind of like a lead into banking, like style regulations, the way you
that's
frame it.
that's
Especially if you have to deposit the Bitcoin to later spend and whatnot, and then if it would be in someone else's charge. I'm not sure.
yeah, I mean there's some complexities to this that just aren't clear yet, but I think like I don't like to be like, "Oh, I would, it's the worst thing in the whole world." Like I'm just not absolute on anything, but I definitely think that uh there's not enough clarity for me to be like, "Oh, this is definitely something I would want to participate in." Like I would rather just buy my coffee with Digibyte directly using the Digibyte blockchain. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
Uh
Especially if we could scale up ourselves to a point
exactly.
where that's mass enough. But
Yeah, where we're not beholden to another level network that, is outside of, again, those aren't reason those transaction fees are cheap is because they're not committed directly to the blockchain, so you're not participating with miners and that sort of thing.
yeah.
So you're not getting that level of security in what you're working with. Um, Jose, do you have any questions or thoughts that you want to add to this?
I was listening in, and I think that some of the concerns you brought up are were things that I hadn't thought about, but I also haven't considered using the Lightning Network. And it makes a lot of sense when you talk about the licensing stuff. I think that we talked about that yesterday in the space, and it's similar to like an exchange that you have to be licensed in so many places, and so yeah, it just kind of it's food for thought, and what the risks are. And also, I think not too long ago, somebody had made a meme of Michael Saylor that because they caught him saying the risk is in the channel, and everybody was like, "Oh, look,
Right.
he's saying it like there's a vulnerability right there."
Right.
So yeah, but I did want to add two things, and I want to look at the resources that you used. You mentioned that I know it's we've heard it kind of like both ways. Like DigiByte was the first major altcoin that it's SegWit. But I think there was it wasn't the first, and I
Is it not
wanted to
the
look.
first?
No, no,
Huh.
no. I was looking at an article by Josiah, and we were actually the third. I think Monacoin and some other and like Peercoin were the first two. But when you talk about like major altcoins, yes, because I don't think anybody I've seen those. When I look at like what is that Coin Wars, and you look
Mhm.
at like all the different old like proof of work coins, and there's
Yeah.
all kinds of coins that you've never heard of, and like never you don't see them anymore, but they're in there, and I've seen them. So I think those two were there, and I can share the article that he wrote.
Yeah, if you I must have missed that. And they're both UTXO, right?
Yeah,
Okay. I was like,
Was it
maybe I must.
PureCoin the one that switched to I think proof of stake? I think PureCoin was also the first to go proof of stake.
Really?
no, it wasn't that. It was so the first place was Grosto Coin,
Yeah.
and the second one was Monocoin, and then the third one was Digibyte. But I'll share that.
Okay.
Share it in the general chat,
That
and
would
then
be great. Thank
and the other
you.
thing, gonna yeah, because and then I think you covered everything when you talked about SegWit and how that enables Lightning, and it also enables atomic swaps.
Mhm.
And I was over here looking through DGB Wiki, and yeah, like you covered it. You've already said it. And the most recent proof of that was the Komodo submarine swap that they did with from Bitcoin Lightning to the Digibyte network.
Mhm.
So I think that's pretty awesome. But yeah,
Yeah, I'm hoping to have I really hope that we can get that CTO from Komodo on next month because I think that will be an interesting deep dive to have him kind of explain what that process took
yeah,
and kind of a nice segue to this kind of like overview. And he can get a little bit more technical on what that means for them and why did they pursue that? Like, why was that an important thing for them to pursue as a goal? You know?
yeah, yeah. But I'll
So,
share both of those. And like I said, I wanted. I didn't look at it that way, but I was wondering is like, well, the reference to be in the slide, like towards
yep.
the end. And that for me is like, okay, that's fun because I can go look at that, read it, and learn something.
And
Uh,
I'm gonna post this. I'll post this right after we get off, Jose. I'll post the PowerPoint in the resources channel, and then
okay,
you can have the PowerPoint to go through, and then the resources page is on that last page on the slide.
okay, and I'm sure that you have I guess a reference for the segue where it talks about the atomic swaps and then
Well,
lightning.
I put the white paper in there.
Okay,
So that might be what you're looking for.
all right,
Does that make sense?
yep. But that
Awesome.
was it. It was a good conversation between you and Archie, and I think I was sitting here and I was listening because I think you'd asked a question, and I was like I wasn't quite sure, so I'm glad that he jumped in and commented on it. But no, it was good discussion, and I'm taking something away from this.
Well,
Some of the points
good.
you brought up.
Well, and really what we want to do is it's not that we have to get into like the nitty-gritty details of the Lightning Network. It's just to have a framework of kind of what it is, when it started, why it started, how to participate, and then, stuff to think about in the future. And then this is just a 7 slide presentation that anybody can use. So if you want to like take this presentation with parts of the other presentations and put them together into a longer presentation, you can. So that's kind of our goal as we're loading these resources into the channel. So people don't have to like reinvent the wheel, So you can take parts of this or parts of others and put them together into a longer one.
Yeah.
So, but I do think it's a relevant conversation right now. And like I said, next month when we talk about the decentralized exchanges, I'm really hoping that the CTO of Komodo can give us a little bit more of a technical overview of Lightning Network as they're interacting with it. So to build on this. Hi, Michael.
Hey.
How are you doing? Huh?
Late.
Oh, that's okay. It's okay.
Pretty good. Thanks for asking.
No, it's pretty casual today. Oh, it's 4 o'clock already. Wow, time flies. But yeah, I like doing these.
If it wasn't, it would be
But
3 o'clock if it wasn't. So it'd still be 3 o'clock if it wasn't.
I know it messed me up this morning, you guys. I'm not gonna lie, because I woke up and I was just like, I'm already late, and I just opened my eyes. How is that possible? But I think this is the last one, isn't it? I think they're doing away with the time changes. Is that right? I heard that somewhere.
I think they might have canceled those plans. I'm not entirely sure though.
I need to look it up.
Yeah, they're like a little wishy-washy.
I would be glad to not have to change anymore. It always messes me up for like a good week. It doesn't take much to rock my world. So, but anyway, well, if nobody has any other questions, we can kind of wrap up this topic.
You need recording this?
What'd you say?
Record this so we can watch it later.
Yeah. There's a recording. It'll be in the archives video section.
Yeah, and I'll post the PowerPoint in there too, Michael. So feel free to use it if you want to. And if you have any suggestions, like Jose was saying, he's got an article that, and I can add that to the resources too, Jose. So if you have any suggestions for the PowerPoint, let me know, and I can make those integrations into it as well before I post. And in the again, in the PowerPoint when it's posted, there's a notes section, so you should have presenter notes available to you that you can use to give you some guidance if you need it. Yeah, I'm hoping that with more of these PowerPoints that we're putting together for each of these topics, that people will feel like they can use them if they're going to do a meetup, or they're going to, whether it's virtual or in person, that they can, able to access and not have to just start from scratch, and add if they want, or take away if they want, or mix and match them together. So hopefully they end up being used. So I'll with that, I'll stop sharing my screen. But guys, what's going on with the banks? I know we don't have a ton of time, but what are you guys thinking? This is pretty crazy.
Just I think what's interesting to me is how much of this goes back, and I think there will be some analysis eventually, but how much this goes back to crypto and like the downfall of FTX and stuff like that. I wonder if that plays a role into this, like going all the way to like Three Arrows Capital and all that. So I think a big question is going to be, was crypto involved in this bigger, bigger banking catastrophe, and if that'll have implications for regulation going on.
That's exactly what I'm wondering. Like, how is that going to affect the narrative? It really, like, I see it like as like FTX being kind of that first major domino.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't want this to, like, because this isn't crypto's fault. Like, this is a player's fault.
Right.
And it just sucks that if this is tracked back to crypto in some kind of way, the narrative can then be, oh, crypto, it destroys banks. But the reality is though, we've seen what is the possibility of happening, and this is happening now. So let's not get too scared because we already know that banks are going to fail and that they're insecure. And so I think people shouldn't lose any faith in cryptocurrency because of this, even if they come out and say, it was crypto's fault. But that's just my opinion.
No, I think you absolutely nailed it. And people really will, read a headline and then they'll make their decision on something based on a headline, and those of us who have kind of like done deep dives into these ecosystems have a very different view of things. I mean, not that we think that anything's absolutely perfect, but I think compared to like the general populace, the people who use the technology, who build on the technology, um, who look at why were they drawn to it, they just have a very different perspective. But one thing that I have found really interesting in my research on this is, and it's kind of wild, and it's like, how they say all roads lead to Rome.
Yeah.
When it comes to FTX, even when it comes to this, even when it comes to SVB, all roads lead to Stanford. It's blowing my mind. 7 board members of SVB were from Stanford. And with FTX, I mean, I know you guys have done your research on that. I'm like, what is it about Stanford that it is like kind of the epicenter of all of these things?
For like a technology beacon, like it's where technology or engineers go.
Maybe, but I mean, but it's kind of like the worst of the worst of this industry all gets tied back to Stanford. Like, I would feel if I had a kid going to Stanford right now, paying all that tuition, I'd be pretty mad. Because the college itself is looking pretty sus. But I never would have, like 2 years ago, if you had said Stanford's connected to a lot of crypto fraud, I've been like, what? It doesn't make any sense. And if you look at the commonality between all of these things, you can always find someone involved from Stanford.
Yeah, I think I saw some stuff on that on just perhaps the culture and also a lot of people growing up like seeing the success of Facebook and places like that. I think a lot of them got a lot of the psychopaths apparently got attracted to Stanford. Whether that be the people from in 3 capitals. I think one of them was from Stanford, but even people like Elizabeth Holmes was a Stanford dropout. I think.
Right. I mean, it's it's starting to get a little creepy for me. Yes, but just something that
maybe they don't like the work; they want to be the leaders. And all the time, when you're a leader, doesn't necessarily mean you're qualified to lead whatever industry you're leading. I think the mentality they might be building into their students is be on top, and it's not not work your way there. That's what it sounds like.
Right. Well, I mean, it's just we got lots to keep our eyes on. This is why it's so nice to have a community because everybody's looking at something different. All come together and be like, "Did you hear about this? Did you know about that?" So you always learn something a little bit different. But well, I really appreciate you guys showing up today. It's kind of a weird time in the world, so I wasn't expecting for anybody to come today. And thank you, Archie, for recording for us as always.
Of course, we'll get that up pretty soon as it comes around.
Yeah, no worries. What were you gonna say, Michael?
That document we're working on, were you able to get anybody for 5 and 6? Because I've been like asking around and no one seems to want to make any edits.
I thought the document looked good. What other edits were you did you want more edits? I thought it looked good.
I don't know. Check out 5 and 6 and make sure you like it.
Okay, I'll check out the list. Yeah, because I looked at it again just the other day because I wasn't sure if more. Hold on, let me pull it up.
I wanted to add something to that though.
Go ahead.
I read through the questions and they were almost kind of like when I look at the questions, the person who put the questions together definitely read the community info paper, and they drew stuff out of there, and some of the stuff there's like out of date. And one of the things that I was telling Michael was that when you're talking about the mining, because in there, like I found where it said like there's going to be like a fifth way of mining, and so they asked specifically what is that fifth way, and I think that some of those questions, to answer them truthfully, would be like, what, like because we know that all the mining algorithms are dominated by ASICs,
Right.
and it would be kind of just an honest thing to say, hey, this is where we're at with this. Like, they might have read something that came out in 2019, but today this is where we're at with it. And some of those, so like, I think answering with like what the truth is, I think would be, and it's not saying that I think the answers that Michael came up with are excellent, and I think I don't know if anybody else has helped edit them, but yeah, like I think they pulled the questions out of the community info paper, and just like I think that's a great opportunity to maybe kind of like update everybody to like, hey, this is what's happening now. This is where we're at.
I was looking at 6, so I've got it up now. I'm looking at 6. I think it sounds good because it's basically saying, we are where we are. There's always room for upgrades later, to do CPU mining, or GPU mining. But it's just not where we are right now. And that's pretty much that's pretty much what he said in just a couple of sentences. I thought that answer sounded good. You said 5 and 6 were the ones you were wondering about, Michael?
Yeah, those were the two. Just wanted to make sure that I didn't say anything that sounded ignorant or presented us in a good light.
I would maybe make a small suggestion on 5, but other than that, I thought it looked good. I didn't think you did any like were promising kind of statements or.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought it looked good, but I'll look at it again tonight, Michael, and with kind of a more focused mind.
Okay.
And
let me know, and I'll get in there and do it, or you can do it. It's up to you.
Okay. Thank you for organizing that, and
or you thank you. You always find things for me to do.
Well, careful if you say yes, because you'll become a best friend.
The saying is, good work is always rewarded with more work. So
yeah, it's totally true.
You're a hardworking guy.
Appreciate your contributions, Michael.
Yeah, definitely.
Archie, thank you.
I'm just doing what I can right now, but I will hopefully take a look at the docket and see if you guys need any help. But I'm a little strapped at the moment.
Well, okay, Archie, what's the best way to get you on there? Because I can add your email.
I think I'm already on with my email. I think is DTB facilitator. I think I'm already on that, but I don't know if I'm editing right now. But if I have some time, I'll definitely take a look. It's just I've just been so swamped at work right now.
Understood.
I think Dave has been helping with that as well.
No, Dave didn't help on this one.
I think you're thinking of a different document.
Oh, which document are you guys talking about this time? I'm so out of touch.
This is a text interview. This guy, he has got a website. It's not like a big deal, but he's been really wanting these questions answered for a while, and so I didn't feel comfortable being the only person answering them, and so I sent them to Michael, and I was like, hey, I don't feel comfortable being the only one answering it, so maybe the awareness team can participate too. And like Michael, you're so fast. Within like an hour, he had 90% of it answered. I was like, I sent it to Renzo and Mark, so. But I can forward. You know what, Archie? I can forward you the Google, the Google Doc link.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll just put it in your Telegram, and if you want to just read through it, and then you can send Michael if you want to make any comments on
perfect.
it.
So this is for relations to tax codes and all that.
No, this is just that's No, this is just an interview, like a
Gotcha.
community interview that this guy wants to put on his website about DigiByte.
Okay, cool.
So
Yeah, yeah. Send
he
it
just
over
had
and
some,
I'll take
and
a
I
look.
thought they were good questions. It was a good exercise in answering those questions, but
Yeah, and I did check out the site, and the site is very good. It's not. It looks nice, and it doesn't look like it has a lot of visitors. But if someone has to stumble around DigiByte on there, I know that will make an investment with what we said. Because I think we talked very.
We can promote it ourselves and get them some traffic, and it's
yeah,
just a
exactly.
good building
It's good
exercise.
content. Yeah, it's good building exercise. Good content. Like you said, I thought the website looked really professionally done. I mean, some of these are really super hinky looking, where I'm like, I'm not even gonna send anybody your way. And he's actually very, he's been very patient with me. So he seems like a nice guy, just trying to learn. He'd
And
ask
I
good
think
questions.
but people like that are really important right now, especially since the market's took a downturn. And I think a lot of maybe one of the reasons that we don't have as much engagement right now is because a lot of people are really bullish about a new bull run coming up or something like that. So this could be very like a demoralizing time. But
Sure.
it's important
I
to
I did
grow
have a
a
question.
back.
What's the due date on this? Like, when does he want this back? We looked at
He
the
does.
site, and
He doesn't have
it
a
was
dirt.
like, okay,
Yeah, he didn't
I
give a
think there
due
was,
date. He was just basically like, whenever you guys can get it to me.
yeah, he had a list of like 5, or so we were number 5 on his list of like interviews that he was advertising on his website. So I
Mhm.
wasn't sure if like this is due like soon or anything like that.
No, he didn't give me a date, so we've got some flexibility with that. But I think it looks pretty good. Um, I'll read it through one more time tonight when I get after dinner, when I have a little bit more of a focus brain. My brain's been on lightning all weekend. So I've been like watching Lightning Network videos and reading Lightning Network articles. um, I gotta like cleanse my brain and then switch gears again. Yeah, looking at live stats, So, but I'll look at it again tonight. But I thought it looked pretty good from what I've read. Um, so anyway, I really appreciate you guys, every one of you, for what you're doing, and make it a lot easier to volunteer.
Of course. Well, I guess we
All
can
right.
call it a day. I'll go ahead
Yeah.
and end the report, and I'll see you guys next time.
Okay. Thanks, Archie, and I'll post this right now, you guys, in the resource channel.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
Archie. Thanks, Jose.
Anytime.
You're welcome. Bye.